Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Tuesday, December 26th. It's day 81 since October 7th. I received a message this morning from Gaza that the enclave is experiencing another communications blackout. The person I'm in touch with is a development aid worker who has an eSIM card that's Israeli. But whenever this happens, it just means that responses by humanitarian aid workers, by medical, emergency supplies, all of those types of things are just exacerbated as Gaza continues to experience bombardment and the ongoing ground incursion by the Israeli army. I have several updates in that regard. Since we had Christmas observations in the US and around the world yesterday, I wanted to be sure to let you know what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Gaza. So the New York Times came out with an article today, and many of the international news sources are talking about this, about the way that civilians have been displaced not once, but multiple times, and how there is no safe place in Gaza. So the New York Times article, it's called, let me just get the title for you. Sorry, the title is called Nearly 2 Million Crowd into Gaza's South as Fighting Intensifies. I don't know how many times, this is today is day 81, and how many times I've said this last weekend has been intensified fighting and it's been the worst yet. But that's what we heard about Christmas, and that's what we heard about last night. And so intensified fighting. According to the New York Times, on Friday, the Israeli military ordered civilians to move south immediately, this time out of an area in central Gaza that was home to almost 90,000 people before the war. At least 60,000 displaced people, most of whom had fled from northern Gaza, had been sheltering in this area. Many people followed the evacuation orders, but in doing so, this has not brought safety. This is directly from the New York Times. Israeli bombing has been relentless during the first 6 weeks of the war, and it has continued across the south since the end of the ceasefire, including to areas in which people have been told to move. Damage from airstrikes and fighting has been identified near almost every shelter in Gaza's 3 southern regions this month. An analysis of satellite imagery and relief agency data shows. In some cases, shelters have been directly hit. Without a new ceasefire, relief officials expect that homeless Gazans in the south will face repeated displacement in the weeks to come. And those who have not yet fled their homes are likely to be displaced in further attacks or as attacks continue. If I know not everyone has access to the New York Times because their articles are often behind a paywall. This one has maps that show the population of Gaza, where they have moved, where there have been attacks. And the reporting is just atrocious as we look at 80+% of the more than 2.2 million people living in Gaza being displaced. And so the news coming in response, to Christmas celebrations or observations around the world is that the war in Gaza has only intensified as Israel has increased its ground invasion and its bombing. According to The Guardian, a few other things to know. They also reported on these evacuation orders, and they said that there is little space left in the densely populated territory. One of the UN humanitarian leads said that Gaza is now a human chessboard in which thousands of people displaced many times already are on the run again, and there is no guarantee that any destination will be safe. Benjamin Netanyahu said the offensive in Gaza is not close to being finished and that we will be expanding the fighting in coming days. Lord in heaven, have mercy. Friends, this means that our calling on President Biden, this means our calling on members of Congress. I hope that you had a blessed time with your family over the holiday. Many people are not working this week, but our work is not yet done. Early on Tuesday, Palestinian residents received reported several airstrikes near Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in South Gaza, and Palestinian health officials said several people were killed. in an Israeli strike on a house in the city. And there are other reports about that as well. It was reported that today, on Monday, more than 100 Palestinians were killed in several different areas in South Gaza. I won't go through those specifics. They're talking about specific neighborhoods. This is still The Guardian reporting. Hamas and allied Islamic Jihad. I talked about the Egyptian plan. I think I talked about this on Christmas Eve. The Egyptian plan, that was a 3-part plan. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to December 24th. If it's not on the 24th, it's on the 23rd, where I talked about the 3 specific parts. Hamas and Islamic Jihad rejected the plan that they gave in return because they're demanding a permanent ceasefire. This is according to Egyptian security forces. Reuters reported that both groups have been holding separate talks with Egyptian mediators, and they rejected the offer of any concessions related to the release of more hostages. And so, according to Islamic Jihad and Hamas, only a permanent ceasefire will result in the return of the remaining hostages, of which there are more than 100 still in Gaza. Several are held by Hamas. Many are also held by Islamic Jihad. CMEP is calling for a comprehensive ceasefire, return of the hostages, immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance, and that the blockade and the occupation be brought to an end. Iran's Revolutionary Guards say that Israel will pay for killing one of its commanders, according to Iranian state TV. There was an airstrike that killed Sayed Razi Mousavi outside of Syria's capital, Damascus. And so the Israeli military declined to respond. That was significant news. The death toll in Gaza is now more than 20,000 people. The number, according to The Guardian, is 20,674 people in Gaza, with more than 54,000 people injured. Reports are indicating that 250 Palestinians were killed in the last 24 hours. Lord have mercy. The Israeli Prime Minister, as I mentioned, Netanyahu, vowed to expand the Gaza operation, saying the war is not close to being finished. We're not stopping. We're continuing to fight, and we will intensify the fighting in coming days. He told legislators from his Likud party. Separately, he told the Israeli parliament that Israel would not succeed in freeing the remaining hostages without increased military pressure. We also know, this is significant in Israel, family members of hostages taken by Hamas heckled Netanyahu during a special session of parliament. They shouted, "There's no time, now, now, now," while holding posters and signs with names and photos of their relatives. And the prime minister said he would shake every tree and turn every stone until those that were kidnapped are brought back. The World Health Organization said it led missions to barely functioning hospitals in northern Gaza this weekend. It said people are growing desperate, people are starving, they are stripping aid vehicles of supplies when they come through. The UN Health Agency and its partners delivered aid, including fuel, to Al-Shifa Hospital, one of the largest and most advanced medical facilities. And the mission on the 23rd of December witnessed rising desperations due to acute hunger, end quote. Israel's foreign minister, Eli Cohen, has accused the United Nations of hypocrisy and ordered the ministry not to extend one of the UN employees' entry visas and to refuse entry for another into Israel. And then Pope Francis, in his Christmas message yesterday, said that Israeli strikes in Gaza were reaping an appalling harvest of innocent civilians and was pleading for an end to the military operations. The pontiff called for a solution to the desperate humanitarian situation by an opening to the provision of humanitarian aid, as he spoke to thousands of people that were gathered at the St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican. I wanted to give just a little bit more. This is from Al Jazeera about the Egyptian deal. This is what I talked about on Christmas Eve. I mentioned this previously. According to Reuters, Hamas and Islamic Jihad rejected the Egyptian proposal that they relinquish power in the Gaza Strip in return for a permanent ceasefire. So that was just reported today. 2 officials from Hamas and Islamic Jihad reported but they denied what the Egyptian sources said about the talk. So a member of the Hamas political bureau said there can be no negotiations without all aggression being brought to an end. An Islamic Jihad delegation that's currently in Cairo to meet with Egyptian officials over prisoner swaps and other issues said that the group had set an end to Israel's military offensive as a precondition for any further negotiations. They said that any prisoner swap must be based on the principle of all for all. In other words, Islamic Jihad means that in order to exchange the hostages in Gaza by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, all Palestinians jailed in Israel would have to be freed. Before the war, before Israel declared war on Hamas and before October 7th, there were 5,250 Palestinians that were in Israeli jails. But that number has now grown to about 10,000 because Israel has arrested thousands more people in the West Bank and Gaza since October 7th, according to the Palestinian Prisoners Association. According to Al Jazeera, Monday, overnight into Monday, so Christmas night into Monday morning, the 26th, Gaza endured one of the deadliest nights in the 11 weeks of war. The other thing I wanted to just mention is that there were raids on Christmas Day in Jenin and in other parts of the West Bank. Again, according to Al Jazeera, even Bethlehem had a raid, but the Jenin refugee camp was raided by the Israeli army, where at least 10 houses had Israeli army members looking for Palestinians to arrest, but no detentions were made. According to a news reporter, Israeli forces called for Palestinian fighters to come out and give themselves up, but that did not happen. Residents report that this was simply a campaign of harassment. I wanted to close. I saw this posted by Shane Claiborne, who is a friend, a leader of Red Letter Christians in the Simple Way. And he posted, I would call it a prayer, but a writing of Howard Thurman called The Work of Christmas. And I thought this was an appropriate place just to still my heart as I'm reporting all this horrific news coming from Israel and coming from Gaza. Howard Thurman says, the work of Christmas: when the song of angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, and when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, and to make music in the heart. May it be so as we work together toward peace.